this TV should be also used. Is there a remote control over there?
Idea.
We have anyway this one, but this is not good for us. So if you can switch it. Okay. We also have to. I have the presentation here, so I cannot check my record, but I can read it from here. We have a thesis by Christelle Haidar. I guess this is in the history of, how's the name of the subject? History of international relation and public diplomacy. As you see, the title is Hezbollah in Domestic and International Politics, Lebanon and Iran's Proxy. It's interesting. I think that the word goes directly to the supervisor, Professor Francione.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a few words to introduce Chris's thesis, which is devoted to exploring the role of Hezbollah in Lebanese domestic policies. And the thesis is well structured into 6 chapters. The first and second chapter, and the third chapter as well, devoted to Hezbollah, its roots, and the role that Hezbollah plays in internal politics. And then we have a very interesting part devoted to the linkages between Hezbollah and Iran. It is that part of the thesis devoted to international relations in that specific context. And the most interesting part is the one which Chris devotes to the triangular relation between Lebanon, that is to say Hezbollah, Iran, and Syria. And then in the final part, Crystal puts an emphasis on the current situation and explores an interesting approach to the solution of the Lebanese question. So, Crystal, it's up to you.
To start, the topic of my thesis is Hezbollah in domestic and international politics. Before going into further details regarding the arguments of my thesis, I would like to mention the reasons behind my interest in this topic. First is coming from the country where this organization originated from and still resides in. I had the interest of studying it more and understanding the reasons why it developed and why it has seduced domestic support. And the second reason is after taking the course with Professor Francione, where we studied the history of diplomacy between China and the United States. Throughout the examples that we were presenting, I found a lot of similarities between that and the ones that Hezbollah also conducts. So I wanted to pinpoint that diplomacy and knowledge channels is not only conducted between states, but it can also be conducted by terrorist organizations. Therefore, we go to the next slide, please. So the following outline of my thesis. In the first chapter of the introduction, I included some historical background about the country and the reasons behind the foreign interest in this small state, which is independent on paper, but in reality it is not. It serves as a perfect example of a proxy state for a government. For example, the United States, Russia, Syria, Iran, and France have always shown interest in the policy and have been conducting the politics of the country. However, in my thesis, I focused more maybe on Iran's interest in Lebanon, which led to the creation of Hezbollah. The next slide, please.
Yeah, no, we are chatting a bit because We have a problem with the presentation, sorry, since our colleague cannot be, sorry, Mattia, I was, okay, now you should see that. Please confirm.
Yes, perfect.
Oh, okay, thanks. Please.
And I'm moving to my second chapter. I wanted to analyze the reasons why this organization existed. I will only mention two major events that occurred, one of which is in 1959, when Musa Sadr, who is a Lebanese Shia Kurd, was studying in Iran, returned to Lebanon and saw the creating living conditions of his community. Therefore, he took it upon himself to improve the situation of his community, and he started organizing the community into a movement. However, his policies did not gain the approval of the entire community, and he disappeared in 1978. In 1979, the Shah's regime, which was supporting Musa Sadr, fell down, and the Iranian Islamic Republic was established under Wilayat al-Faqih. The second event is that happened was the Israeli invasion of Lebanon in 1982. When Israel invaded Lebanon, having in mind that Khomeini wanted to export his Iranian model outside of this country, he found this moment to be the perfect one in order to infiltrate the country. Therefore, after several considerations of a lot of tactics on how he can enter and help the Shia and the PLO in the south, he approved a small group of the Bazdaran, the IRF, also known as the Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps. So he sent them inside of the country, and they resided in Baalbek, where they started to provide training and logistical support to the Shia leader. And that's when a new paramilitary structure was born called the Islamic Resistance in Lebanon, known as the IRF. Then, after the creation of this organization, the Shia, they wanted to protect their interests in the future and the interests of the IRF. Therefore, they created a committee of 9 in order to come up with this organization. This committee of 9 gave the approval also of Wilayat al-Faqih, and they created the Lebanese Shura Council, also known as the Lebanese Consultative Council, which took the name of Hezbollah in 1984. Moving to the third chapter on the next slide, please. I discussed in details Hezbollah's ideology, objectives, enemies, all of which represented in the open letter in 1985. I also discussed its terrorist attacks, prominent figures in this organization. Another argument in this chapter that I made was explaining how it was able to gain this strong political support and able to control the country. And the reason behind that is the huge domestic support that it received, especially from the Shia community, through the vast social service network that Hezbollah was able to provide. It provided, for example, charities, schools, universities, hospitals, and none of these services would have been feasible without the financial aid of Iran and their international science. Another argument that I made was proving that diplomacy can also be used by terrorist organizations. And Hezbollah it fit the perfect example in this argument, as it used soft power and diplomacy in all its channels in order to gain support, allegiance, and popularity. For example, it created its own media apparatus and its own foreign relations department. Moving to the next slide, please. In this, in chapter 4, I discussed the dependent triangular relationship between Iran, Syria, and Hezbollah, which started since Syria's occupation of Lebanon, then its withdrawal, which left the country with a huge vacuum of power that Hezbollah filled. I also discussed Hezbollah's role in the Syrian civil war. I raised several questions in my thesis, one of which is why until now the Lebanese state continued to allow Hezbollah to hold its arms despite the withdrawal of Israel from the southern borders, and why the state's army is not being deployed in this security zone. Some of the reasons are that since the creation of Hezbollah, it was backed by Syria, which was occupying the entire country. And Syria wanted a strong military presence in the south in order to force Israel to reach an agreement regarding the Golan Heights. The second reason is the fact that Hezbollah contains heavy weaponry more advanced than that of the Lebanese state, and if they were to enter into any conflict, it is obvious who is going to have the losses. Lastly, the Lebanese state fears that if a future confrontation between Hezbollah and Israel were to occur, Israel would hold the Lebanese state accountable. Now, moving to chapter 5, I discussed the international strategies to combat and weaken Iran and its proxy. I began with providing the 3 strategies that were suggested to be taken by the United States, moving between diplomatic, assistance, and security strategies. Then I mentioned the actual strategy that it applied, which is through the HIPAA sanctions, all of which prove that the United States does not have any distinction between the political and the military wing of Hezbollah. Then I discussed the international cells that Hezbollah has created in almost every continent, where they engage in illegal activities such as drug trafficking, arms smuggling, money laundering, and so on. And also these countries have succeeded on enlisting Hezbollah under terrorism. However, the second question that I raised is why until now some European countries and the EU, they keep on postponing on enlisting Hezbollah's political wing on the terrorist list as they did enlist the military wing. And some of the reasons are that, number one, some European countries, they want to maintain a dialogue with all the political parties present inside Lebanon, especially that the political wing of Hezbollah was elected in a democratic process. The second reason is that they acknowledge the strong link between Hezbollah and Iran, and they do not want to hinder the relationship with Iran, especially regarding the Iranian nuclear agreement JCPOA. Lastly, and what I believe is the most important one, is the presence of the UNIFIL troops in the southern border, which are composed of European countries. Therefore, for example, Italy, Spain, and France, they fear to enlist the political wing on their terrorist list, thinking that if they were to do so, Hezbollah would retaliate on their own troops. Moving to my last slide, where I discuss the current situation of Hezbollah, for example, regarding the October 14 revolution, and how it fueled this peaceful movement since it was able to infiltrate its community. Then mentioning how it tried to hinder the investigation of the Beirut port explosion, and it threatened every single judge that was being appointed. Lastly, I presented some statements that Hezbollah was giving, which completely contradicted that of the Lebanese state. Last of which, for example, is the Lebanese statement regarding the Russian war in Iran, in which they condemned these actions. However, Hezbollah said they support it, and they said that the Lebanese statement completely contradicts Lebanon's neutrality, completely forgetting the fact that Hezbollah itself engages in wars outside of its territory. Lastly, I presented a state solution, which is the creation of a federal state in Lebanon. Such a system would allow for a better representation, and the people would find it easier to hold politicians accountable. Also, local issues would be addressed, which otherwise would be overlooked by a central government. And with such a system, Hezbollah would limit its interference only in its own territory, and it will not be able to interfere in the development and policies of the other areas. And if we were to increase the power of the central government, we will be directly increasing the power of Hezbollah, as it already controls the state itself. One can conclude from my thesis that Hezbollah has already imposed a de facto federalism in the south of its own territories. Therefore, why not impose it on the entire country and limit their interest?
We thank you, Crystal. It was rather dense and well presented in right time. So we have, I think, time for some comments. I'm asking Professor Francioni, but even Professor Ventura, of course, to comment, or...
Actually, I don't have any comment.
Okay. Marco?
I have a quick question based on your legal background, right? Maybe not that person, but we know each other. And I know how you are. So I know that when you mention federal states, you must have in the background a very clear idea about how personal laws should play to their restructuring of the constitution of Lebanon. So, am I right that in your mind a federal state comes with the abolition of personal laws, or at least some form of neutralization or relativization of personal laws?
Yeah, of course, I think that we want to impose the federal system. In the beginning, of course, we need to also abolish sectarianism in order to succeed. I just didn't mention sectarianism because I wanted to tackle how Hezbollah can be weakened, and in this case, I think federalism is the main point. Of course, sectarianism should be abolished, which would limit the interference of all the religious figures in the entire country.
But federalism is probably easier
Yeah.
than
Yeah.
abolishing.
Yeah, especially
the
having the
sector.
background of the country, which we cannot completely disregard. The country is made of 15 sects, and we cannot act as if we do not exist.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, that's also interesting from a point of view of, let's say, institutional engineering, because federalism is supposed to be, according to all the theories, a good cure for other kind of illness, namely the presence of very different cultural, even religious, but cultural and linguistic cleavage in a very broad territorial areas. Actually, there's all these theories of the goodness of federalism in large democracies. In this case, it's rather the contrary. I mean, federalism should be a sort of way of accommodating, let's say, cleavages in a relatively small distances. And this is interesting because probably it is a mix, as Professor Ventura was, a mix of different goals, improving the institution, but using institutional change, let's say, to preempt other kind of problems that cannot be solved with the ordinary legislation at the moment. And that's probably something that it's interesting. Of course, we don't have the opportunity to experiment this kind of reforms, but maybe we will see in a while. Okay. Yeah.
Think about sources and the language. What might be a reason that spread sort of construction comes with Arabic? I mean, sort of a sort of translation from Farsi into Arabic of some Shia, or that was already rather taken from Iraq. How does it come? You had Farsis, so you were reading on Arabic or Arabic sources. Now, of course, the Iranian infrastructure, this is probably more for Andrea than for yourself. The starting point comes in a different language, right?
Yeah.
How does do you have any sense of how that is interplayed?
Yeah, all the Shia groups that were present in Iran at that time, they came from Lebanon, and the ones that controlled the organization, they were all from the Lebanese country. Therefore, everything was in Arabic. Even until now, we have political figures when they go on television and they say speech, they say it in Arabic, not in Farsi.
Okay, if there are no other comments from, I'm also looking in the eyes of my colleagues, even on the screen. I would propose, although this is probably a little change on the program, that we are going to listen to the second candidate, since we have so many connections, we don't have to change this setting. You have time for a coffee, for a caffè lungo, 20 minutes, and then we will have, of course, a little session with the evaluation of both of you, and then you will come back, let's say, quarter to 12 or 10 to 12, and we have the come si chiama proclamation, sorry. Thank you very much. So we can, you can stay if you want to listen to Gulce, if you had too much coffee already. I mean, it's not forbidden. Okay, Gulce, welcome, and sorry to see only, to meet you only on screen, but there will be another opportunity. Maybe, I'm not saying the next graduation day because it's in 3 days from now, probably you will have no chance, but maybe we can meet soon in Siena. We have a dissertation which is presented, of course, on public diplomacy. This is the only thing I can say. And sorry, because if I put you on the screen, I can. The Turkish soft power comparative study of Turkey public diplomacy outreach before and during the COVID-19 pandemic. Unfortunately, very timely. I would leave the floor to Professor Francesco Mastroni.
Yeah, just for a brief introduction of this work, and by the way, congratulations, Gulce, for your new job. Gulce has been hired by the Italian embassy in Ankara, so this is a new position, which is obviously in line with our program. So congratulations for this position.
That 15 minutes after this thing, I will call you to set some new strategies for our promotion of Siena.
Okay, and then let's move to the thesis. This is an interesting dissertation and a study investigating how Turkish public diplomacy, its structures, and also its approaches have evolved over the last 20 years, and it does this in a comparative perspective. Through an empirical investigation, in particular, of how communication strategies and also aid policies developed during the COVID-19 pandemic in particular in 4 different countries, which are the case studies for this dissertation: 2 countries from the Western Balkans, Kosovo and Montenegro, and 2 countries from Western Europe, Italy and the UK, that of course are relevant for the national interest of Turkey for different reasons, and Gulce will tell us why these cases are relevant. Well, it tries to investigate how these foreign policy projection and public diplomacy strategies have changed as an effect of the COVID-19 pandemic. So analyzing in particular the communication and aid policies developed by 2 different institutions, the embassies in these countries and the Emir Institutes in the very same countries. So I'll leave the floor to Gulce for this presentation, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Mastroni, for the introduction and your guidance to this thesis. And thank you also, Professor Verzichelli, for your nice wishes. I would like to be there in person, especially on graduation day. It would have been a once-in-a-lifetime experience, but unfortunately, my new job, I couldn't come to it. So the title of my thesis, as you mentioned, the Turkish soft power, a comparative study of Turkey's public diplomacy outreach before and during the COVID-19 pandemic. It especially focuses on 4 case countries: Italy, the United Kingdom, Kosovo, and Montenegro. The analyzed time frame starts from 2002, when the Justice and Development Party, the current government, took power in Turkey, and it lasts until the first half of 2020. Before proceeding to provide the objectives and findings of my thesis, I'd like to briefly explain why I chose these 4 case countries. Building on my Turkish nationality and my personal interest towards Italy has always made me reflect on how in what way these 2 Mediterranean countries are surprisingly similar. This includes a long history of cultural and trade relations. However, this does not reflect immediately on the reciprocal knowledge of the 2 nations that they have on each other. So for the scope of this master's degree program, I wanted to investigate the public diplomacy strategies, initiatives of Turkey in different countries, and of course, I couldn't have it. I wanted to include Italy as my first case country. However, Italy is not Turkey's only strategic partner in Europe. The United Kingdom also shares a long history of friendly relations with Turkey. Both Italy and the United Kingdom are NATO allies. However, after Brexit, obviously Turkey's public diplomacy endeavors do not comprise the United Kingdom. So by including two European NATO countries who differ in their European Union membership statuses, I wanted to examine if Turkey's public diplomacy differs from Italy to the United Kingdom. Another region in the world that Turkey attaches great importance to is the Western Balkans. Both Kosovo and Montenegro have an EU prospect, but these two countries differ in the Mediterranean religion. Obviously, they do not have a state religion, however, the majority of the population of Kosovo, as you know, is Muslim, whereas the majority in Montenegro is Christian. By comparing these countries, I aim to investigate how and in what ways that this Turkey's public diplomacy changes, public diplomacy outreach changes from Kosovo to Montenegro. My thesis is divided into two parts, before COVID-19 and during the pandemic. The first section is devoted especially to the empirical research on Turkish public diplomacy institutions, stakeholders, actors, strategies conducted in line with Turkish foreign policy objectives. The first part also lays out the particularities of what came to be known in public diplomacy literature as the Turkish model. The Turkish model suggests that Turkey is being a predominantly Muslim, yet I'm sorry, I'm hearing my voice, but is it?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. This Turkish model
going to get on streaming. I don't know if we have those dozen millions people who are listening to us. Okay, I think we can go on with two proclamation. The first one is in Inglese, of course, but in Inglese we say dottoressa for some reason. You know, it's a very false. Dottoressa Crystal Haida, the Degree Assessment Board has approved your thesis or defense with a graduation grade of 110 out of 110 and unanimously awarded cum laude. It's too long, this translation, and I prefer to myself. In accordance with the power vested in me, I hereby proclaim you Dottoressa Magistrale, of course, in public and cultural diplomacy, laurea magistrale LM81, etc., etc., etc. But I think it's more important what I said already. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations.
Well, no, you can go.
And now we have a second one for today.
I'm sure, Professor, right before that, can I say something? I just received a message saying that on YouTube, the people don't see me. So if you can fix this problem.
Prova a condividere lo schermo. A condividere lo schermo.
Okay. You they don't see you, but they can hear.
I think they can hear, yeah.
Prova a condividere lo schermo dell'altro Meet.
Quindi vado sull'altro Meet
E condividi lo schermo.
e condivido lo schermo. Questo.
Poi vai sull'altro.
It is something working now? Non è il contrario, dobbiamo condividere questo.
Questo non è già condiviso?
Sì, perché tanto ho condiviso il tuo schermo, quindi rilasciare lo schermo.
Sì.
La regola è questa.
Per funzionare.
Can
No, they said that they cannot see me. Maybe if you can share your screen.
yeah, the problem is which screen. Anyway,
Stavi già condividendo.
no,
No.
To
share the other one.
share this one.
And now they're telling me that they can see me. Maybe they're wrong.
No, forse era l'altro.
It works now?
I'm just gonna ask.
C'è un lag.
Okay, yeah, I know they can see.
Okay, good.
Confusion.
In that case, in any case, now I have to switch to the proclamazione. It's too complicated.
No, uno sull'altro.
Questo sistema è...
Ho sbagliato 10.
No, perché ho cambiato prima. Questo è 110 il lote, quello di prima.
Aveva errore perché c'era...
Ti vede lo schermo di voi che modificate?
Sì, no, perché stavo
un
cercando,
errore.
ho cambiato il verbale di prima per errore.
Lo vedono.
Lo so, non posso farci nulla. Sto cercando la proclamazione. Mi dai la proclamazione, leggo di prima. Ok.
Diversa. Quella che c'è.
Sì, ogni cosa è diversa, fantastico. Anyway, it's a little bit funny, but we got it. Ms. Gulce Obadaz, given the... Yes, sure, sorry. Given the result of your academic career, this commission has approved your degree examination with a score of 108 out of 110. Therefore, by the powers conferred on us by the rector and in name of the law, we proclaim you Dottore Magistrale in Public and Cultural Diplomacy, classe LM81 in Cooperation and International Studies. Congratulations, Lucio.
Thank you very much.
And sorry for this technical problem, but we had to switch from... Okay, we really want to see you soon, but also maybe we can organize a little school trip to the Italian embassy and to the Italian Institute of Culture, which is very important. We have every year a meeting there. Well, we used to have before the COVID, but we'll be back there, sure.
It would be a great pleasure, of course.
Okay, all the best.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Dai, ce l'abbiamo fatta.